Folks say, I'm on this side of the dirt, so,
Are you recording this meeting?
which is the Society for Human Resource Management chapter here in Henry County. We have Michonne Sawyer Esquire, and she is the Senior Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for J.E. Dunn Construction Company. And we have Sarah Cloud, who is the Director of Learning and Performance for the United Way of Greater Atlanta. So thank you, ladies, very much for joining us in this important topic, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first question I want to ask all of you, what does DEI in the workplace, what does that mean? And we'll start with Michonne.
How did I know you were going to do that? For me, DE&I in the workplace is the intentional efforts that can be made by everyone throughout a company to make everyone feel comfortable being their authentic self. And the definition can always be broadened, but that's what's key to me. It goes beyond, we focus on race a lot because that's what we're hit with, and gender more than anything, but it goes beyond that. I think in a lot of cases, you're looking at economic differences, you're looking at age, you're looking at sexual preference, or even in the South, which is really huge, religion. And so all of those things, it's all about making everybody feel like they're a part of the team and that they have a voice and that they can be heard.
Absolutely, thank you. Ms. Lisa?
Well, I agree 100%. I do think that diversity is bigger than one or two categories, as Michonne was saying. I do think it's things you can see, things you can't see, and having a formal declaration, hopefully with some education and some spotlight on it, it helps people to appreciate and to respect, or at least be open to realize that there are others. And you know, the more diverse, the probably the more value to the business, to the bottom line, if you can ever get that ball moving.
Thank you. Ms. Judy?
Yes, I agree with both Lisa and Michonne. That is perfect definition of it. And it does go beyond. It means opportunity for everybody in the organization. Diversity of thought, creativity comes into play with that. If you really want to grow your organization, you actually need to involve everyone, and you need a diverse workforce. You cannot just have like-minded people. It stunts your growth. And it doesn't give you that opportunity to advance and grow, and your employees don't feel engaged. So it does improve employee engagement as well, because now you're showing everybody how much you respect them and how much you value their opinion and value them as a person. So we all are a human race. If we stop labeling people and try to watch our own biases, then we can properly handle DEI in the workplace, and we will all embrace it, no matter what color you are, what gender, or what religion, whether you vaccinated or not, or whatever the label they try to put upon you. You are a human being, and respect that. We are all created different, and we all come with our own values, and we all come with our different perspectives.
Thank you so much. I love that. Lack of diversity of thought stunts your growth. Love it. Sarah, what do you say?
Good morning, and
Good
thank you
morning.
for the question. So for us, I would say the first thing that we did in defining diversity was take an internal look at what our makeup is. And that is makeup of employees, it's who's working there, it's who's in leadership, it is who is the boots on the ground. So taking and identifying who's working in your organization, as well as looking at who your organization serves. So that's step number one. Step number two in defining diversity for us was looking at the different dimensions of diversity. So it's not just about, like the other panelists have said, it's not just about the race, and it's not just about the identity of someone, it's also about the other dimensions. So the secondary dimensions, the organizational dimensions, the cultural dimensions. And then our third step was looking at how we're going to create an inclusive culture. So defining what our culture looked like, and then creating a action plan around how to include all of those different dimensions of diversity into a culture for our organization. Thank you.
Oops, I'm sorry. Thank you. And so I have a follow-up question for you, Sarah, since you went last. I want you to lead into, you talked about creating a culture. So where does DEI in the workplace, how is that created? Where does it start?
So I do think that it starts with leadership kind of setting the stage. What do we want our culture to be defined as? And then the employees, along with leadership, have to walk the walk and talk the talk. So I wanted it to come from, and not just me, our leadership team wanted it to come from them first. Do they value diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and what does it look like? And is it showing up through their actions? So it's really a responsibility of everyone, including individual accountability.
Right. Okay. Okay. Ms. Lisa, what do you say? Where does it start?
Well, ideally, it starts with leadership, but on occasion, as boots on the ground, I know that sometimes you have to sell it. And sometimes you have to show the business need and the business rewards out of it, to have this diverse workforce of bringing different contributors or different ideas or different things. But you can show community branding, and it can go front end and back end, but the persons that are driving it have got to have credibility. So they can't have been the worst offenders in the past, and then all of a sudden want to turn a rock. I mean, it's going to have had some kind of credibility to this person selling this idea. But we definitely want the executive level, the highest level, and we want those people either involved or signing memos or definitely, I mean, they don't have to be the ones on the front, but they do have to walk the walk, as you mentioned, Sarah.
Excellent. Michon?
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody said. The thing that that I've learned in doing this, and the cool thing is I've been doing this for 20 plus years, even before it became in vogue, so to speak. You've got to, like Lisa was saying, you've got to integrate it. It's got to start at the top, but it has to be integrated throughout your organization, because otherwise it gets lost somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And so it's not just training. It has to go beyond training. And one of the things that we push at JE Dunn, and I'm working on building that, is we want to integrate DE&I throughout the organization. It needs to be a part of the decisions for marketing, even as simple as what picture do you choose to display? What is that commercial saying? When we're responding to proposals, I can't tell you how many times I've gone, gosh, don't say that. Because like, this is not right way to say that, or this isn't opening our doors. We want to, my friends, some of my DE&I friends and I coined this phrase, we are disruptors. I mean, we are literally in the room to make sure that we are stopping you from doing things that you have done in the past and teaching you to do things differently. And you'll be surprised, like Lisa pointed out earlier, it does boost the bottom line. Because at the end of the day, if you're hypothetically, let's just say I'm selling rainbows, and I'm marketing to different communities, each community might receive my message in a different way, or I might be able to sell more rainbows if I target that specific community. But guess what? If I don't have someone from that community in the room, I'm not going to get that. So I'm going to be colorblind, sight blind, completely blinded as I go out trying to not only sell myself, but what my product and everything else. And so it's all about broadening those ideas, and that needs to be everywhere, from the way we got from our governing organizations to our public, our Supreme Court, You know, it's all about diversity of thought. It's not one thought ruling over another. So it does not mean that you're trying to get people who are on your team or on your side. It's embracing that person who's going to come in that room and disagree with you. Because as you delve deeper and try to figure out what that person is, and you got to listen for that, but what that person's thought process is, what's in it for them, what do they find to be important, you'll find that you're building a stronger organization.
Thank you so much. That diversity of thought, there it is again. How many of us have seen from the outside looking in, how many of us have seen marketing and ads and thought, why did they think that was a good idea?
Yes.
Right? Miss Judy?
Thank you. I agree with what the ladies are saying. And, you know, I have been thinking of something different because when I was running my other operation at the airport, I did something different. I brought in frontline for diversity when we did training at the top, instead of starting just at the top. Because think about, a lot of leaders are so far between, you know, they're so separated from what the frontline know and do. So to bring them in the beginning with the leadership team and the board of director as well, because that's everybody at the table, then you have a better start, because now you have buy-in with employees when they see that you are taking this serious and you're walking the walk, and they can help you navigate through that communication and that change, because it's going to be a big change management piece with employees for their buy-in. So if you just start with leadership and not include the front line, it's not good. Because I remember consulting a oil refinery. They were 90% white male, and they wanted to introduce diversity, equity, and inclusion. My first thought was, where are the males here that you would bring in the room to show what best way to introduce this concept to them? Because everyone thinks it's race. It's the 10 legal terms that they have under the law, you know, gender, race, and things of that nature. But it's not just that, it's broader. And you have to be able to come into that particular workforce and explain that to them so they can have buy-in, so they can change and embrace. But if you think you can do it at the top without their buy-in, it's not going to work too well. That's why we have problems now.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. My next question, and this is a little bit of a hot button, but I want to hear from each of you. Are equity and equality the same thing? Lisa, you first.
Let's see, I wrote down to make sure I got the exact definition out of the book. Equity recognizes each person is different. Equality, obviously, is kind of an older philosophy of treat everybody the same. So there are different categories, but you really can't have one without the other. For many years, we moved to a school of just treat everybody the same. Okay, well, we've learned that isn't the best method. Some people do take a little extra coming from where they've come from or some other situations happening, and you do have to apply a little additional resources or latitude or that type of thing in order to get what your goal is. You know, I'm very goal driven. So what is our objective? It's easy for me to say, again, business. What's our business? Obviously, DEI is the right thing to do. You know, it's the appropriate thing to do. It's the legal thing to do. But it's easy to say when you have markers and measurement tools and things that you can point to, and you can show it's the business reason to do this.
Thank you. Miss Sarah?
So I like to think about it this way. Equality is, like Lisa said, a blanket. It's everybody gets the exact same tool basket. Equity is truly treating people like an individual. What does Sarah need to be successful? What does this community group need in their tool basket? And it's individualizing that experience for them. And that's the way we share it in our organization is, Our goal is truly not treating everybody the same in our community because that's not what they need. So we are focused on equity and determining exactly what that group needs in their tool basket. And that's the solution we provide.
Thank you. Ms. Judy?
Yes, I agree with Lisa and Sarah. It's pretty much meet everyone where they're at. And that way, when you meet everyone where they're at and you work with them and ask them the right questions on what is it that they need to be successful, instead of assuming, because a lot of times we create programs, training programs, and we just collectively put people in it. But if they are not there, you need to kind of individualize the training, or at least coaching, even if you have the same training of DEI, but everyone is in a different space. So equity, you must meet people where they're at. Equality, yes, you can do the training and just, it's all equal to everyone, but how impactful or effective it'll be. So if you really want to be effective, that's why you want to include equity in your program versus equality.
I love that. I've never heard the statement, meet people where they're at in this context, and it makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Ms. Michon?
Ditto what they said. I agree 100%. It's all about meeting people where they are. I mean, and Judy nailed it, because everybody has different needs. Everybody, it's all about making sure that everyone in our organization has what they need to succeed. And that at the end of the day, we will all be stronger from that. And that's what it's about. I mean, from the minds of youth, my son was telling me the other day that, as we reach out to try to help homeless people, don't just decide what they need or what kind of housing they need. Ask them what would make them happy, what would make them, and that's the way we have to look at our organizations as well. How do we achieve true equity? And everybody should have learned, because history is prologue, equality doesn't necessarily, and in most times does not mean equity.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, next question. What are ways to take action for companies who are interested in implementing programs? What are ways for these companies to take action on DEI in their businesses, in the workplace? We'll start with Ms. Judy.
Okay, again, this will vary on the organization or the company and the size of the company as well, because most people like to start off with training, but you still need to see where the organization is. Some organizations may already have diverse workforce that are comfortable with each other, like a family environment, but then you have some organizations that are not. So yes, you can incorporate training. Coaching is really one of the best ways, like a lot of one-on-one coaching, because it just depends on the individual person within that company. They may need a little bit more than just basic training, because it's a mindset. You're looking at your environment that people have grown up in, their culture. It's a lot that play into factor versus you just rolling out a training. So sometimes you may start with coaching. Why not one-on-one coaching? And then you'll understand what's going on within your organization, if all possible. It wouldn't take long. It's more like research up front. And then you will be able to design a better training program that fit the need of your organization. It's just not blanket.
Perfect. Okay, Sarah, what are your thoughts?
So I would always suggest, again, like I started this conversation, looking at your internal makeup. So who's in leadership? Who, meaning, do you have women in leadership? Do you have enough men in the workforce? Looking at your makeup and identifying gaps. So what are some gaps? Do you have a fairly new to the workforce group and you need to work on your recruitment strategies, getting in the right mix of people? So identifying your gaps and then solving for those gaps. And I would also suggest a committee. So getting a committee together, an opt-in committee of your workforce that should include leaders, it should include the boots on the ground team. It should be a group that is willing to solve for the issue of inclusivity. Maybe you don't have an issue with inclusivity, but what does this group want to do to continue to turn a culture of inclusivity? So I would suggest getting together a group. Sometimes people don't have time to opt in to these committees, so it may take a gentle nudge. It may take a tap on the shoulder. And then last but not least, I would communicate what that group is doing. Communicate it with all staff, communicate it with leaders, communicate what that group's objectives are and how each and every person in that organization should be a part of it. What are their actions? Thank you.
That is awesome. And that speaks to what everyone said earlier about involving everyone in DEI and not just leadership or not just, employees, but everybody collectively working together to implement something that is meaningful for everyone. So that is great. So I want to move on to the next question because it kind of piggybacks on this one. And I'm going to ask Michon to start with this next question. When and how do you determine as a business that I need to bring someone in to help us with implementing a DEI program?
That's interesting question because I get bombarded with stuff from different consultants on the daily in the hundreds. First of all, it depends. It begins with the metrics. I think you have to decide, you have to determine, like Judy was saying, and I think Lisa brought it up and Sarah just did as well. You start with what you've got. Let's assess what you've got. Let's see who we have internally as resources, and let's figure out how we use those. Because for me, I enjoy bringing in outside thought. But a lot of time, if I've already got the resources inside, I'd like to take advantage of those first. And how do we get a leg up? When in 2020 and 2021, everybody started doing these whole, these trainings and these things. One of the things that we started doing since I've been at JE Dunn is we actually have lunch and learns. But it's not bringing in a consultant or somebody to talk. What we do is we facilitate a conversation on one of our construction projects. We make them optional so that people don't feel like they're forced in the room, but we feed them. And so we offer a lunch or a breakfast and we bring them in, and then we ask people to talk about concerns that they've had. And we do what we can to nudge the conversation. But what I've learned is, like what Sarah was saying, you're kind of getting a pulse on the thoughts within your organization. And for an organization as large as ours, it's got to go way beyond leadership. It's got to be intrinsic. It's even signage on the job sites to remind people to be cognizant of other people's viewpoints. It's having those discussions. I mean, I went to one where I was expecting, what are they going to say about race? Because, it's always in construction, it's a very dominated organization that's both male dominated and Caucasian dominated. So, I'm assuming the conversation was would be, mostly about race or gender. It was not. It kind of evolved into a religious thing. Wow. And that's the eye-opening type of conversations that you can have. But that's a good way to get started. Assess what you've got inside, get the mindset, figure out where the concerns are, and then you strategically put a plan in place on how to target those. And that way, so that when you are bringing in those consultants, they're talking on something that's of interest and of concern to your broader group, rather than just throwing a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Because otherwise, that's called checking boxes. And checking boxes is a scorecard for us to say we did something, but do we really accomplish a lot by doing that? I would argue no.
Thank you so much. Again, the diversity of thought. People will tell you what they need. Lisa, what do you think?
Well, important to me is whether or not there is a culture of trust. You know, do people respond to exit interviews honestly, or do they feel like there's not going to be any follow-up, or there's going to be backlash, or what? Do they talk to their supervisor? Do they talk to people? Would they actually tell you? Do they have such a horrible reputation in your organization that there's no one on property that could lead a DEI initiative? You know, those are the reasons why I would say, yeah, we're going to need to bring in a neutral outside consultant just to be our figurehead at this point. Still got to have buy-in, still got to have business objectives, still got to have all these other things, but I might need someone to direct traffic if need be. And that would be why I would look out to an outside party.
Okay. Culture of trust, that's so important. So important. Sarah, what about you?
So to piggyback off what Lisa has said, I do think if there's a trusted individual in leadership, I would encourage leaders to be the ones to walk the walk. Like I said, not to beat a dead horse, but to say, this is important to me, and I want to show you how important it is by leading this group. So I think it's both. It's a little bit of both. It is that internal advocate and that internal sponsor of the program or initiative. And it's also getting subject matter experts externally. So like Michonne said, training is a piece of it, but it's kind of the old school mindset of diversity. You do diversity training, we check the box, we're done. We don't have to do it for another 3 years. But that's truly not what 2022 and 2023 DEI looks like. So I would say bring in an external consultant for things like training, for specific topic coverage, right? And then have your internal sponsors so that your teams know that it's important to everybody. And this is not just something that's gonna, like Michonne referenced again, that's sticking to the wall and just seeing what stays and what doesn't.
Awesome. Thank you. Judy, what do you think?
Okay, and I agree with what the ladies are saying. And me being a consultant and an expert in DEI, also worked 33 and a half years with the airline industry. So I know the corporate side as well. And I was with DEI during that time as well. Yes, I like to come in, as a leader and work with the team. However, me being a corporate expert as well as a consultant, I will come alongside the entire team as a consultant to work with them. So I will understand, I will speak to the leaders first, then you speak with the frontline employees. So you want to separate sometimes, because trust me, they tell me things they wouldn't tell a leader. So I'm that person that I'm like, okay, so I can work together to understand what the real root of the problem is. And that way I teach also on bias more than anything, behavior, mindset, that type of training, because if you don't help someone understand they need to change their mindset, or they have these hidden bias against whatever, whether it's religion or just whatever behavior, whatever type of bias they may have, it's hard for them to change. And that you have to get to the root cause of when you're looking at diversity, honestly, because at that point, some people say, oh, I don't have that problem. I'm not prejudiced, or I'm not, but everybody has some slight prejudice, no matter who you are. As a human, you got some type of bias that you have against somebody or something. It may be hidden and you're not aware of it, but bringing that to fruition for people to see that and to their awareness, because they have to be aware before any kind of change can occur. That's why it'll prevent you from checking off the box. And small businesses think they don't need it sometimes, but they do. Growth happens so fast. And you don't have a diversity, equity, inclusion program in your, under your HR, training or any of that, and growth happens and you get all the people that come into your organization, now you are out of control. But if you start off in the beginning with a great diversity, equity, inclusion program, and then you build upon that, wow, growth, you can handle anything that comes your way. So, that's just me seeing a larger organization and smaller companies as well, and the value that diversity, equity, inclusion brings to all organizations.
Thank you, ma'am. You know, talking about checking the box and the desire to implement a DEI program, if a box is, if the goal is just to check a box, then you failed. Because DEI programs are, DEI is to be implemented and carried through for a reason. And so if it's not genuine and if there's nothing happening and it's just, okay, yeah, we did it, we checked the box, then you failed and you've wasted time and probably resources. So, okay, I have another question. And I'm going to start with Sarah because you talked about hiring practices. So my question is, are hiring practices a good place to start in initiating DEI best practices? And if so, what are some easy changes that can be implemented to support that?
Absolutely, yes. This is one of my favorite topics because one of the hats I wear is human resources. So when you're evaluating a position to post, you have an opportunity to say, here's what I need. So I've got a position that's vacant on our call center team. And right now I have no people of color in that department, as well as no women. I have a chance to say, I want to make sure that I provide this manager with a diverse candidate pile, right? So no, I'm not going out and just picking out only women. I am making sure that I'm presenting to that manager a lot of options, okay? You know that if you post a position for a call center, you're gonna get 500 applications. So making sure that us in human resources are presenting diverse candidates. That includes experience, that includes education background, all of that. So I wanna make sure I am looking for candidates that are varied, all right, first and foremost. That includes interviews. It also allows for an opportunity to look at an assessment tool. So does your organization have an assessment tool? We do use Predictive Index here, in which allows for us to see how different employees communicate with each other, what their preferences for work are, all of these things. And one of the areas that it looks at is team. So this team works together by X, Y, Z. It also evaluates what we're missing in that team or that group. So when recruiting, I will look for some solutions to whatever gaps have been provided in that team's analysis. So if you have an assessment tool that you use, really pull out opportunities from it. And I'll pause there and give everyone else an opportunity to add.
Thank you so much. All right, Michonne?
I agree with what Sarah said. But one of the things that I would truly add is I believe in focusing on, in order to get diverse candidates, you've got to look in diverse places. And so what I've worked to do is, number one, we're expanding where we're looking. If we've got, if say alumni from, and I'll just pluck Georgia Tech out, I'm going to be targeting those women's organizations, those Black organizations, the Latino organizations on that campus. I'm not going to just be looking at Georgia Tech. We've created several diversity scholarships that we're using, and you've got to be a person of color to even apply. And those types of things are, again, I go back to it, it's intentionality. You've got to be intentional. But in addition to that, we're also focusing on retention. The people that we have here, because everybody's talking about the great resign. If people are really looking at, do I want to stay at this company? And quite honestly, if you're a female or a person of color, a lot of times people are trying to poach you. They're reaching out, you're getting job offers every day. So it's about being intentional, but it's also, I think Judy brought it up, it's about the numbers too. We also want to make sure, we want to look, and if I'm looking at my workforce and I see okay, I'm in the city of Atlanta and I don't have, and I'm saying like but let's just say on the construction site, I'm in the city of Atlanta and I walk past this construction site and I see 5 African Americans. I don't really need to do a lot of math to know that in this city, that's a problem. I mean, and so you begin to look at it and you're like, okay, well, what have we done wrong here? Or what haven't we done? Not necessarily wrong, but what haven't we done? Because in a city like Atlanta, in the construction industry, we don't have African Americans out there on a job site, then something's missing. And a lot of that so for me, that means going out to the schools. Are kids learning about these opportunities? Do they know about them? Let's start with the elementary schools, the middle schools. We've got programs where we're actually targeting elementary schools to let people know about the jobs in construction. And then also, obviously the high schools and everything. Are we tackling those returning citizens as they try to start their lives again? There's all these opportunities, but it's all got to work simultaneously. We want to retain those that we have, but we also want to up the ante for our recruiting. And it's not just entry level, it's upper level too. Do we have people, like Sarah brought up earlier, do we have people in those key seats of leadership that are going to bring diverse ideas so that they can trickle down? Who's in the room where the decisions are being made? All of that matters.
Thank you very much. Ms. Judy?
Yes, what the ladies just stated is awesome. I just want to put a little bit of a different twist to it, only because when you say, do we want to start with hiring practice, a good place to start? In my opinion, depending on the organization, but when I work for an organization, especially aviation, I was actually the first African-American, or actually female, to be a station manager in Philadelphia. So I was the first in cargo, and being that in that role, it made it uncomfortable because I was treated so badly, as I was trying to navigate my way through there, being the only female, not even just African-American, in that space, that DEI wasn't present in that location that well, and to navigate through there. So even though they were intentional for hiring me in that position, they didn't make it comfortable for me, like when Ms. Shawn mentioned retention. So I didn't want to, it made it difficult for me to want to stay. So even though you're intentionally hiring people in certain roles, for that reason, if you don't have a solid DEI program or people are not embracing you, you're going to lose people because they don't want to be mistreated and they're going to go somewhere where they're comfortable. So that's why I say it all depends on the organization. It depends on, the, whether it's a small company, large company, or what's your makeup. Just like Sarah was saying, you have to know what your company offer, what's your culture, what is your employee engagement like, what are your employees, you have to really look at it. What's your makeup before you start putting other people in that role and they're not embraced, because it can be a bad situation.
It's not enough just to seek someone out who is diverse. You have to provide support
Absolutely.
for the diverse folks that you pull into your organization, or to your point, they won't stay. And, talking about hiring, but retention, if you are hiring diverse people, but you're not retaining them, then that again is counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. So, Ms. Lisa.
Well, also a little different route. Obviously, we're asking what are some things you can do to have a diversity, equity, inclusion program. But if you're in a very primary state in your organization, and your leadership is saying, I need to fill the role of a lineman, okay, telephone pole lineman, and they're working off of old school, and they're like, this is not a job for a woman. Okay, so I immediately grab a sheet of paper, I draw a pie. I say, okay, you've just cut off 50% of my population to be able to recruit from to get you the best candidate to do this job. Okay, so then we're going to draw out another quarter of the pie, because we're going to say these people are wanting to do a different type of work. They're not interested. They're managers, they're IT, they're administrative. They're not interested in this field job. Okay, well, let's draw off another quarter at least that say they can't do the physical. They're not interested in doing heights. They don't want to climb. They can't meet the requirements. So I'm like talking to this frontline manager saying, or this leadership person going, okay, so you want me to find you the best person in this market, and you have now eliminated all of this pool for me. So there is a reason to be inclusive. There is a business reason for you to open that pool back up and appreciate finding the right person for the job. And
I love
that's
that.
just, I just can't tell you how many times I've grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote upside down. You see the pie?
I love that. That's a great analogy. Thank you. Okay, I have another question for you all. So we talk about in the DEI space, coaching, mentoring, sponsoring. I want to know your thoughts on how they are similar, those three roles, a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor. How are they different? How are they similar? And why are they effective as it relates to a DEI strategy within the workplace? Was that too much in one question? No, Michonne, I'm going to let you go first because you're grinning and you're shaking your head.
No, I love that question. They are all very different. To me, and the way I would see it as a coach, is someone who comes in and tries to guide your process. And coach and mentors can be similar, but a mentor is that coach that takes your personal development in my opinion, a little more seriously. And key to all of that are the allies and sponsors. I put allies as, they're interchangeable, but the difference is that sponsor or that ally is that person who talks you up when you're not in the room. And that's why that's important. People forget that the sponsorship is key. You can have all the mentors in the world, but if you don't have someone in the room either pushing you or supporting you when you're not there, then you're doomed to fail. Judy brought it up before, and it's something that I was teaching some of the students. We have one of the schools that we've kind of adopted is North Carolina A&T. And one of the things I was talking with some of those students about is they go out looking at their job, preferences, where do I want to go for this internship or this job, this final job. And we lost a candidate that I was really, really sure was going to come to us, because he had a wonderful experience, talked about how it was the best experience of his lifetime and how he met all these wonderful people and he felt so supported. And I'm like, okay, well, why aren't you coming here? Someone else offered him, I want to say $5,000 more for a job. And so it became for him about the money. And I argued, first of all, I was like, well, we've given you scholarships. Can we count that towards this? But beyond that, what I said to him, and I've wished him well, as he made his decision. But what I said to him moving forward is, I want you to look at that organization and any organization you go into. And so when you get in there, just like Judy said, you're getting in the door, but how much support are you going to have once you get in that room? And it is hard. I mean, I would argue that probably all of us on this panel have experienced it at least once where we've been the first or the only. And I'm tired of being the first and the only. I truly am. Can we get past that? But what I said to this kid is like, as you choose your other jobs moving forward, because I have a feeling that he's going to come back. And I said that to him. Look at what you're getting, what kind of support systems you're getting, because that is important. And I think it's important for us to be teaching that to this new generation as they enter the workforce. It's not just about home and work balance, like everybody talks about, or being able to work from home. It's when everybody's going out to lunch, or you sitting at your desk by yourself having a sandwich. Just a thought.
Thank you. Sarah?
So like Michonne said, each of those definitions do vary and all of them play a very important role. I know I continue to refer to leadership, but I think that that internal sponsor for us, sponsorship looks like one of our leaders on our C-suite essentially saying, this is important to me, here's how I'm going to lead it. Coaching for us is really at the management level. So anyone that has supervisory responsibilities. And what that means, again, I can only speak for our organization, but what that means for us is, are the managers doing their part to live a culture of everyone has a space and a place at this table? People leave their jobs for two things, right? Well, they leave for a lot of things, but two of the biggest things right now, especially with our younger generations in the workforce, are a manager and the culture of the organization. So we use coaching for our managers to really ensure they have the right skill sets to be able to lead on their own and not wait for HR to tell them to lead or the C-suite to tell them to lead in a certain way. It really is their responsibility to create a department or a team that views things through a lens of DEI, if you will. And then we did sponsorship, coaching, mentoring. So internal mentors are really, really important. So maybe your most trusted person in your organization is not your manager. A lot of times it probably isn't. Do you have someone in the organization that could provide a mentorship for you to grow within the organization? So that helps us with some individual accountability. Instead of me, Sarah, an individual contributor saying, gosh, my organization is not diverse, and they're not doing anything for me, we use mentors to really say, how can I grow and what's my responsibility? And just because my name tag doesn't say I'm a leader, what do my actions say? So mentors have been really, really important for us in that way.
That's important, and that's great. Thank you. Judy.
Okay, yes, I agree with Michonne and Sarah. As far as the sponsor, yes, you do need someone in that C-suite speaking on your behalf, because I know I had that on many occasions, and that's why I was able to get positions I needed to get move forward. Because without it, you're almost not at the table. And as far as coaching, now here's a twist for me. I did reverse coaching as well, like two-way coaching. So with the frontline employee group, I used to have them come in and they would coach me as well, as far as asking the right questions. Coaching should be asking the right questions, pulling that out of the individual, what you need to help them with, so really they find the answer within themselves. But I like coaching the reverse way too, so I can see how I'm perceived with the employees, because I may be doing something, and especially if it's on a larger scale, to find out what it is I'm doing that I need to change. So I do it both ways, because it's beneficial to that employee, because then they're also learning how to coach and how to interact better and improve their communication skills as well. Now, mentoring, yes, mentoring is great too. So I used to do with my middle management level and have them mentor the frontline, so that way they can help them. It's almost like succession planning, because you're mentoring them to the next position. So every time someone leaves, you already have somebody in line to take up their place as far as the succession planning, and everybody feel that they're valued, because now you're giving them an opportunity for advancement as well, and you're having them feel that they're valued.
Thank you. And Lisa.
Well, and coaching to me is largely a supervisory type of role, or trying to declare what the objectives are and trying to bring people on to meet expectations, and there's a mutual understanding of expectations. Sponsoring is being an advocate, and ideally, yes, you have a sponsor and they're ideally at a different level, so they are in the room when you're not, and that type of thing. Mentoring is very big. We talked about a formal program of mentoring. Sometimes organizations have a mentoring program. Sometimes there's an informal mentoring. There are natural leaders. There is a peer-to-peer mentoring. I've had a lot of value in that. In the DEI world, obviously that peer-to-peer allows people to like cross-train or get to know each other, and you take down some of those barriers of not knowing, just not knowing people as individuals versus just, you can't see the forest for the trees type thing. You just see trees. But there's, you don't have to wait for a formal mentoring program to exist. You can approach someone outside of all the other lanes and ask for a mentor, ask somebody to mentor. And the mentor doesn't tell you how to, doesn't tell you what your goals are. They don't tell you how to do the job. They don't necessarily speak up for you in a different meeting, but a mentor helps you be a sounding board and to talk through what you could have done or how you could do this better, or something they observe in another third party, and y'all can just talk about it. So it doesn't have to be confrontational or abrasive, that type of thing. So mentoring to me is probably my favorite.
That is great. And I have realized throughout my career that sometimes unintentionally, the diversity of thought, which is my favorite phrase for this conversation, the diversity of thought and the exchange of that diversity of thought between mentor and mentee, that really is a thing. And that kind of comes into the reverse coaching situation where sometimes it's a mind broadening experience, not just for the surface of you're my mentor and this is what this is supposed to look like. For me, it has oftentimes evolved into something more than that. So I'm very grateful for all three of those roles and relationships. So we do have a question from Facebook Live. Someone asked, do any of you use internal assessment tools as a best practice? I'm going to ask Judy to answer that first for us.
Yes, internal assessment tools, quite a few of them. Actually, you have employee engagement, so you would use like a survey to see where the employees stand. You also, you're hiring, like Sarah mentioned earlier, it's important to see where your organization is and measure that on how you're hiring. So that's assessment tool that are out there that you can use for tracking that, as well as performance. I mean, where are you, when we look, like Lisa mentioned about your productivity and your profitability, when you start implementing a great diversity program that really worked, check your performance. Are the employees, if they're engaged and they're feeling good about themselves, then your performance will improve, and you can measure that at the starting point of you implementing a diversity, equity, inclusion. Your customer service, like Sarah mentioned that too, because that's your external customers. How are they being treated? You could see customer service improve as well, because now you have happier employees who feel valued. So they're going to pass that along with your employees. So your customer service scores will go up as well. So it's so many ways that you can measure diversity, equity, inclusion. And like Ms. Shawn say, don't check off the box. You do something intentional to measure how you're improving. This is how you can understand how you're moving the needle and how change is occurring within your organization with the diversity, equity, inclusion.
Thank you, Judy. That's awesome. Lisa, what do you think?
Being in HR management, I'm going to say before you use any tool, you're going to make sure it's validated and it's credible. Don't go out there and pull something offline and decide this is going to be your tool. Don't be weak in how it's interpreted. Make sure it's standardized, or it's there is, you have consultants that are involved in probably selling you the product. Make sure that you know how to read it, and you don't water it down over use of time. Got a few scars here and there from some of these things I'm talking about, and but just make sure that you can validate it in a court of law. Thank you very much. Make sure you can validate it and that you do see value.
Thank you, ma'am. Sarah?
So I would agree with both of what the ladies said. We have a process of assessment through the life of someone that works here. So it starts at recruitment. It starts really at pre-recruitment and looking at the job description. And then it goes through the life of your employee engagement surveys, getting opinions on what your team wants to see. It goes through their performance reviews. and the metrics that they have set in their teams and departments and how those align with the organization. We also use assessments, the behavioral assessments that Lisa mentioned, that yes, are all validated, because you do have to make sure if you provide for one, you do not in an equality standpoint, but you provide for the team to make sure that you're not picking and choosing groups. So I would definitely say use assessment tools if you can, and use them through the life of the employee all the way through that exit interview.
Thank you so much. And to wrap it up, Michonne, what are your thoughts?
First of all, this was amazing. But I agree with everything that everybody else has already said. What gets measured gets done. So, it's all about, if we're saying we're going to put in an initiative, we're going to want to know, did it work? Are we getting that message through? But also, like Carolyn was saying, or Judy, I think said this, not you, Carolyn, I'm sorry. You want to assess and make sure that whatever programs you're putting in place are the ones that you actually need. And so that starts with an assessment as well. So no, it's everything. Where do I need to target my resources? What do I do? And we even use some of the assessments of how we work together as a group. How do you think? How do you work best together? What team? And then we try to make sure that when we're putting teams together to get things done, that we've got, again, that diversity of thinkers, So yes, assessments are key.
Thank you so much. Do any of you have any parting thoughts? It is 10:57 and we are going to wrap up. I want to say thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge and your insight. And hopefully someone watching who is in the position of considering, do I need to do this? And how do I do this? I'm sure they've gotten some great information. So thank you all for sharing. Does anybody have any last parting thoughts in our last minute and a half?
No, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and to be on a panel with some wonderful ladies and expert opinion. I appreciate it. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Carolyn. You're amazing. And yes, I learned a lot myself today. I love to learn as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
We appreciate you too, Miss Judy. Anyone else? Ladies, have a fantastic day. Again, thank you so much for sharing with us. And we'll see you next month.
Absolutely.
Everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.